Welcome to this week's episode of the Liberty Unveiled podcast, formerly the Yeshua Unveiled podcast. I am your host, Brad Hopp, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Pastor Sam Jones. Together, we are unveiling liberty one episode at a time. We'll be discussing the latest in trafficking news, insider stories from those being delivered, and studying the Founders Bible to learn how to return America to sanity and true freedom. Our sponsor for today's show is Teshua Tea Company. Visit teshuatea.com or deliverancetea.com. Hi guys, welcome to the Liberty Unveiled podcast. I'm your host, Brad Hopp, and obviously my friend Pastor Sam Jones is back again this week, and so we're still in the middle of our conference. For those of you that tuned in to last week's episode, we're recording 2 episodes today while he's over here. So we're still going through our conference this week at church and stuff, but like I said, we decided we would just get a couple of episodes recorded here and stuff. We didn't really get a chance last time to talk much about the tea, and before we dive too far in here, I'd like to hear, we brewed up the 500-year-old ancient tree pearl tea ball, and just get your feedback on what you thought of it and stuff.
Well, I drank it a lot quicker than it took to get it to that 500 years. I mean, no, it was really good, really good, rich in the. So this is, if I'm correct here, this is the same stuff that's in the 500-year-old tree tea cake, yep. Which is best tea I've ever had. Yeah, and I've had a lot of good tea. Mm-hmm. This is kind of a step down from that, which I mean, we're talking Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant here. Okay, I mean,
well, and it might have been the brewer.
Well, yeah, but I'm going like, I mean, we're talking, going from really good to still really good, just not quite as good as the tea cake. I think the tea cake's probably, but that's just the cake's supposed to be there, the pu'er in that style. But, wow, mm-hmm. It was good, really smooth, has just a little bit of a sweetness to it. Mm-hmm. Rich, one of those that for a plain tea that doesn't have anything added to it. What I mean by that is it's not like the orange. Now right. That's really good. But obviously, when you start adding things like that to them, they get lots of flavors.
Right.
This is just, it's so rich, you don't need anything added to it. Mm-hmm. And in fact, my wife and I, we were going to try it, and we tried it one time, I think we added another white tea to it that's a vanilla one. I said, oh, can you imagine how sweet it's going to be? I mean, it was good when I added that to it, but it's even better just by itself. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those that it's designed to just be, mm-hmm. it's good to go.
Well, this one we're trying today is actually our lowest priced tea. This is the 90-year-old wild tree. Just to kind of be a little comparison here between the most expensive one and the least expensive one that we have. And so I thought I would bring this one out. I don't think we've tried this one before. We've tried the Pilo Shun. We've tried the Imperial Palace fermented. We've done the Feather Mountain Black, I believe. We did the.
Now, did you get Judd to try any tea?
Yeah, he actually had that.
He likes tea, actually.
He had the 500-year-old ancient tree. The same one you just had.
Okay, and did he like it?
He did. He did like it. And we were talking about that, and then we talked about the coffee a little bit. Joe's not a big coffee fanatic. I'm much more of.
I've never seen Judd drink coffee, so I imagine he probably wouldn't even sip it.
Yeah, it's funny. I got stopped by TSA twice 3 weeks ago.
Wow, I just had a huge brain fart. I was sitting here going, TSA, like, oh, is that like a tea company?
No, Transportation Security Administration.
Yeah, I didn't even have to admit that, but
I'm TSA pre-check. I have kind of sort of gone back to at least part-time delivering fire trucks, and so I had to run out to Portland from here. And then I flew down to Birmingham and drove from Birmingham with one up to Cleveland, Ohio, and then flew home. And it's funny because I had stopped out when I was on my way out to Portland. I had stopped in Clear Lake, Idaho, I think it's called, or Cedar Lake, Idaho. I think it's Clear Lake, Idaho. It's right in between Coeur d'Alene and Spokane, Washington. I mean, it's late.
All I know is they probably grow potatoes out there.
Maybe, but I think it would be further north or south. It's not right there.
I don't know anything about Idaho.
Yeah, this is up in the northern Panhandle. But anyway, so the coffee roaster that I had bought, I actually got out there a year ago. And so I stopped out there on my way out a couple of weeks ago and picked up some coffee from him. And the manufacturer, he and I were talking, the owner and I were talking and stuff, and he was telling me about an Ethiopian that he had gotten, and so I'm like, well, I'd like to pick up a couple pounds before I take off and stuff, and I can usually skate right through TSA pre-check. I don't, you travel enough and you figure out what to take and what not to take, and I can usually skate through. And both times I got stopped when I was flying from Portland to Birmingham and then from Cleveland to home. Coffee beans. They're like, what's that in there? I'm like, it's just coffee beans, okay? Leave me alone.
Want to try one?
Yeah. They were green, so they weren't roasted. So they wouldn't have tasted very good. But anyway, so it was kind of fun.
Okay, so I don't know much about the roasting process at all.
Right.
What does a coffee bean taste like before it's roasted?
I have never tried a green coffee bean. Early.
Might have to have an experiment sometime.
I might have to.
What's the process like?
Okay, so the process on roasting coffee is...
And talk a little bit about what that looks like, too, because the visual that I get, and our audience is much smarter than me, they're much more informed. I get, and I know this isn't what you do, but when I hear roasting, I think of a marshmallow over an open fire, and I'm just imagining like a coffee bean stuck on a stick over. And I know that's not really what it is, but that's just the mental picture that I get.
It depends on the area of the world that you're in. You're not actually terribly far off because, like my friend Charlie Milbrat, who's a missionary in Thailand, the manufacturer of my roaster, when he first experienced...
Oh, by the way, the Thai coffee.
Yeah.
Our church has been doing that. In fact, actually, I'm going to need to get another bag from you sometime. Just multitasking. And everybody likes it at our church. And I told everybody, try the coffee. What did you think of the coffee? Oh, well, let me tell you the story about the ministry. I was like, oh, wow, that makes it even better. That it's accomplishing this. And I've had it a few times, too. Really good. Sorry to interrupt on that, but just thought I'd throw that out there.
No, that's fine. So anyway, so the guy that actually manufactured my roaster, there's something about coffee when you have it fresh, like within a very short amount of time of roasting. Once you have it fresh, it's like you just... That's it. You're done. You're done dealing. It's like I can't go anywhere else. I can't have anything else.
No more Charbucks. Huh?
Yeah, no, nothing else will stand up to it. So how did I do this time? I think I might have oversteeped it a little bit, but
I don't think so. That's about right. It's a little stronger, but this is the type of tea. It's going to be stronger. It's a kind of a black tea, and so I am naturally biased. I like green and white teas more than I like black teas. And so it definitely has a little bit more of that bitterness to it, but all black teas do. It doesn't have the nautical flavor of that one.
No, not the Imperial Palace.
But it tastes like a really high quality black tea. Is what it tastes like to me, which is it's surprising to me because cheapest one. And I'm going, okay, kind of expecting, maybe not so good. No, this tastes like a really high quality black tea. That's how I describe it. I go, wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
And the flavor, because that's really not that dark of a color.
Right.
If you guys can see that or not, for a tea, that's pretty light. You guys are probably looking at that saying, wow, that's really light. It's got a ton of flavor for being as light as it is.
Yeah. So going back to the guy that built my roaster, he was traveling up through the mountains in Thailand and had come across this place where This guy had this little, I don't even want to call it a hut because it really wasn't. It was like 4 posts in the ground holding up a roof. That's really kind of what it was. And he's out there and he's fire roasting the beans and stuff, and then he's making coffee as people are going up the mountain and stuff, and had this little tiny, I don't even know if you could really call it a coffee shop, but for lack of a better word, a Thai coffee shop basically, and he's fresh roasting and stuff, and Ken had driven past it and gotten up the road just a few hundred feet or whatever, and was like, you know what, back down and turns around and grabs some coffee from the guy and stuff, and he's like, whoa. But literally the guy, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember the story correctly, and I know that they do this in a lot of your Arab countries and stuff, they'll literally put it in a pan and just sit there and roast it like you kind of do, like roasting popcorn over an open fire, where you just sit there and keep it moving, and you don't want it to sit. You got to keep it moving the whole time.
Now that's not what you do.
Ours is an air roaster.
Okay.
And there's 2 styles of commercial roasters. There's air roasters, or fluid bed roasters are also called, and there's drum roasters. And drum roasters can be either electrically powered. I mean, they'll all have electrical components to them, but drum roasters can be electrically heated, or they can be gas heated or LP heated, natural gas or LP. When you use a drum roaster that has either natural gas or propane, you're going to get I'm trying to remember what the term is. Hydro something.
A little extra flavor in there that you don't want necessarily.
Yeah, it's a gaseous compound, where a fluid bed roaster doesn't do that. It uses hot air, and so you get a lot cleaner, a lot smoother coffee and stuff. Drum roasters and fluid bed roasters argue about this stuff all the time. I mean, it's just kind of one of those John Deere and International things. They're both pretty decent. Well, sort of. But anyway, we all have our preferences and stuff, and
the red ones are the ones that work.
Yeah, exactly. So I've trained him. But the fluid bed roasters, because they don't have the gases going in, they do actually have hydrogen sulfide, I think is the actual chemical that I'm trying to think of. They don't have the hydrogen sulfide where a lot of your drum roasters will. And a drum roaster roasts this way. It's constantly, it's basically a big washing, or a big
a rock tumbler almost,
like a rock tumbler, or a dryer, like a drying machine. And so they'll just tumble the beans around and around and around. And if they sit too long in one spot, they'll get these little black tips on them. They call it tipping.
Does that give it a real bitter flavor then, almost?
No, it's just an imperfection that you don't want to see as a roaster. You try to avoid tipping, and you just get a little dark spot where it'll pop off. And it can happen with the fluid bed roaster if you're not cycling or pushing enough air through the beans and stuff. But so we try to keep the enough airflow going through the beans that we don't get tipping and stuff too. But yeah, so we use a fluid bed roaster. I just like the product better. It's just a cleaner coffee to me. So, and you, like, we always try to hit a 1 second, a 1 degree per second rate of rise. And so you have a certain rate of rise that you want to see the coffee go up over like in my case, I usually try to hit what they call first crack on coffee, is where it's just like popcorn essentially. I mean, it's not popping, but you'll be going along and it's roasting and you're roasting and roasting, and all of a sudden about 395 degrees you'll start hearing go up, and it sounds like it's popping, like it's popping corn, and it's pop 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 pop, pop. And that's called the first crack. And then So I usually try to hit that about 9.5 minutes, and then we go from there and go to whatever roast level we're going to. On our dark roast, we just get into what they call the second crack, where you hear it start doing that cracking sound again. So it's interesting. It's a fun process. I really enjoy it and stuff. And
So how long does it take to dry or roast?
about 12 to 10 to 15 minutes, kind of a general ballpark.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, it's not.
I figure, I do some dehydrating. Well, I should say maybe I used to do some dehydrating. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But it takes hours, obviously, to dehydrate anything, and I guess you're not really dehydrating the coffee beans, right?
No, you're actually roasting them and stuff. So yeah, it only takes like 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the roast level that you're going to and stuff. Yeah, you could roast it in like 6 minutes if you wanted to. Just crank up the heat and let it run. But
And then you're eating dirt.
yeah, it would be nasty.
So how long? What's the process after that? Like how from get your not green beans, but your beans are green,
Right.
To drinking a cup of coffee. What's the process there? Is there anything you have to do after you roast it?
No, once we roast it, I bag it and then I ship it out, and it goes out immediately. I try to bag it and have it out the door within an hour or two of roasting time. Normally you want, like for your K-cups and stuff like that, you want that stuff to sit for 24 hours to kind of off gas a little bit, because when coffee's been roasted, it will release CO2, carbon dioxide, for the first 24 hours or so, which is my favorite time, really, because I love just when I've sealed up the bags and you just have that.
Yeah, that's where just getting
the aroma, and stuff. But on the K cups, you want to let it sit for 24 hours before you put it into the K cups and stuff. And we're looking at getting K cups if I can come up with the money or whatever. But right now, it's it would be roughly $3,500 to get the processing equipment to do the K cups and stuff. So we're not in a position to do that yet. But
that would be. I imagine that would be a lot more work.
It would be, because we got to grind it and then fill it and everything. So you got to have a grinder, you got to have a filler, and then you got to have the sealer and stuff. And so there's 3 more steps there. And I'm really partial to the whole bean coffee. I think that whole bean, when it's fresh ground, right as you're putting it into your coffee maker and stuff, creates just so much a better product. It's just fresh ground coffee is just, and there's different levels, and sometimes people don't understand this about grinders either. There's blade grinders, there's burr grinders, there's and the better of a burr grinder you can get, the better your coffee's going to taste. A blade grinder is really best left for herbs. It's really not. Yeah, they call them coffee grinders, but I would really recommend people not use them for coffee grinding, just because you're going to get uneven sizes of the granules of the coffee. You're going to get some bigger ones, some little ones, and it's not going to create a nice uniform flavor in the coffee. It's going to kind of be all over the place.
So basically my only knowledge and philosophy when it came to coffee was from a joke, and it was, why did the coffee taste like dirt? Well, it was ground just 5 minutes ago. And so you're saying if it was ground 5 minutes ago, it's probably not going to taste like dirt.
Yeah,
it's going to taste better.
Taste like dirt, and especially if it's a good quality coffee too. I mean, if you're using a Robusta is not as near as good of a quality of a bean as an Arabica or there's basically 2 types. There's either Arabicas or Robustas, and the Arabicas are a much higher quality bean type, and they're higher elevation grown, where your Robustas are a lower elevation grown, and they're not near as good.
So now, of course, if somebody's going to get this coffee or this tea, they can go to TeshuaTea.com.
or deliverancetea.com. So deliverancetea.com will take you right to the Teshua site. I did it that way just to make it a little bit easier for people, because I know people have a hard time spelling Teshua. And Teshua means deliverance, so it makes it easy and stuff. So
I want a little bit more about the tea, maybe, too. I guess that was kind of what originally started off the conversation. But.
Yeah. So like I said, this is just one of the lower.
I mean, if you're drinking, I'll be honest, if you're drinking Lipton tea and you get this is the cheapest tea. I don't want to make it sound bad, bottom of the barrel or anything like that, but I mean,
no. Well, our bottom of the barrel is
100
still
times better than Lipton. I mean,
or
this is
Bigelow,
this is
or
good, yeah. Or,
right. And that's the thing, you know.
Or even Celestial tea. Celestial tea is one of the better bag teas. This blows them out of the water, long shot. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, if Celestial is better, I tell you Celestial is better. But no, this is really good.
So anyway, I currently have a leak here someplace.
Sometimes I can't figure out how to pour.
I might be overfilling too. But anyway, trying to figure out where we want to go next with this. I think we want to kind of dive into the Jamestown plantation and stuff. And start looking at the foundation of our nation, because we were talking last episode about going back to the old paths and the old roads and stuff, and we need to understand the old roads in our own nation, but really the old roads that we need to be looking at are not only the old roads in our nation or the old paths in our nation. We need to be going further back to that, to the old paths of our belief as Christians and our Judeo-Christian roots, and what does that actually look like and stuff, and so yeah.
Well, should we get started here? I guess, and of course we're going from the Founders Bible, great Bible to get one. Where I'm actually reading from yours today, because I'm up here for the conference and I forgot my Founders Bible. I packed a few other things, but forgot the Founders Bible. I had to get more room in my suitcase so I can bring home more books.
Yeah, I have like 3 or 4 I need to pick up.
Yeah. As a little side note, I brought like a huge suitcase and it barely any clothes. And Sarah's kind of looking at me like, "Did you pick that big suitcase?" I'm like, "Oh, no reason." Afterwards, she goes, "You're gonna fill with books, aren't you?" Like, maybe.
Maybe.
So it starts off here and it says Portugal and Spain, with their maritime prowess, so their navy prowess there, dominated much of the Age of Discovery during the 15th to 17th centuries, the period of history encompassing the Age of Exploration and the rise of European colonial expansion. With most of the Iberian resources concentrated in Central and South America, where more wealth had been found, much of North America was left open for the exploration by the French, English, and Dutch. While mocked by Spain and France, English attempts to establish a permanent settlement had been met with continual failure over the years. Yet, despite King James's the first reluctance, Sir Richard Hakluyt, we'll pretend like I said that right, the visionary force behind the dream of seeing a permanent settlement in America under the banner of Protestant Christianity, and Sir Edwin Sandys, the elder Christian statesman and constitutional architect in Parliament, were successfully negotiating the Charter of 1606 on April 10, 1606, seeking to offset the expansion of other European nations abroad. King James I formed the Virginia Company and assigned land rights to the settlement of North America. It was thought that if they introduced some viable competition, that might help spur on a greater measure of success. So the Virginia Company established 2 divisions, the London and the Plymouth Companies. The London Company was granted that part of Virginia between 34 and 41 north latitude, while Plymouth Company was assigned 38 to 45 north latitude. On May 14, 1607, the 104 men and boys of the London Company abroad aboard the ships, Susan, Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery landed on Jamestown Island to establish the Virginia English colony on the banks of James River, 60 miles from the mouth of Chesapeake Bay. The colonists' purpose was to settle Virginia, seek a water route on the Orient, find gold, and make a handsome profit for themselves. In the Virginia Company of London, promoters had advertised that the Virginia colony was a paradise inhabited by simple, friendly people, which certainly did not prove to be the case. While the London Company's settlement at Jamestown became the first permanent English colony in North America, the Plymouth Company had landed in present-day Maine a few days later in May 1607 and established the Popham colony, which failed after 13 months, and the surviving colonists returned to England. This kept the Plymouth Company from settling in New England until the Pilgrims arrived. Both the Jamestown colony and the Plymouth colony of Pilgrims embraced different roles in birthing the national character of the United States. Any thoughts off that before we continue?
Well, I think it's interesting that they both had different roles in developing the nation, and we really look back to the Pilgrims of Plymouth as to our spiritual heritage, even though both of them really had, because if I remember right, Jamestown, they still had a pastor that still committed this nation to, or this new land to the Lord and stuff, and but yeah, there was a difference between the two, and the spiritual standing between the two of them.
Right, and we'll keep reading here because I think it's going to get into a few of the things I was going to bring up, and it'll explain it better than me. So we'll keep reading here. But it says, the Charter of 1606, a most unique charter for colonization. For those venturing out, the charter was everything. It gave the colony its legal right to exist. It was the basis of their authority. Their grant of permission, delineating the powers of governance of land to the proprietors or settlement company. It defined the relationship of the company to the mother country, free from involvement from the crown. For trading companies, the charters vested the powers of government in the company in England, but proprietary charters gave governing authority to the proprietor, who determined the form of government, chose the officers, and made laws subject to the advice and consent of the freeman. The charter also defined the colonist's mission and stated the purpose, the reason for such an undertaking. Now, this is vitally important because there's a false doctrine, I would say, out there that people would go and say that the Revolutionary War was ungodly, and that it was sin, and that it was rebellion against God because God placed government there. Now, in looking at this, in fact, Edmund Burke argued this in Parliament, actually, on the side of the United States, and it comes back to this charter here. The United States, through the charter system, is actually establishing their own government. So though they're part of the mother country, England at this time, they actually do have their own government. And that's why it was such a big deal of taxation without representation, is because it should have been representatives from America there, because they had their own government system. And so in some of the grievances in the Declaration of Independence were basically that King George didn't care about the Americans' government, even though the charter gave it legal right to have it. And he would just go and take those charters sometimes and just say, "Oh, I don't care." And so he became he became to a point where he was using the divine right of kings instead, and placing himself over the law instead of the law over him, which becomes incredibly subjective and terrible, essentially.
Right. Wait a minute, doesn't that sound like a lot of the modern day Christians, that the lesser of two evils, and that we can pick and choose? And
well, As a matter of fact, it does.
Maybe we have our own divine right of kings, and we just think we're the kings and we can do what we want. Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Federer or not. So Bill Federer is same line as David Barton.
Okay.
Historian, great guy. You guys should check him out. But he wrote a book, Who is the King in America? And out of the people group, of course, he says that the people are king. But the thing is that we're still under what's called lex rex, the law and the prince, or the law and the king. The law is above us, and so it's a constitutional republic that we have. But that's probably getting into stuff that we don't necessarily need to right now. And it continues on. It says, Jamestown, our national mission. The Charter of 1606 finalized with the seal of King James I, which I'm just going to point out again. So this is agreed upon by the monarchy, these charters, okay? We're not talking about something that was just made up by the people, but it's actually sealed by the monarchy. So the monarchy has agreed to these rules, and then later on they violated them. But, you know, even though I'm drinking tea and I'm a tea snob, my patriotism is going, ugh. So I'll start over here. The Charter of 1606, finalized with the seal of King James I, was the legal proclamation of both the mission and purpose for both Jamestown and the Plymouth Colony settlements. Its main stated purpose was, we greatly commending and graciously accepting of their desires for the furtherance of so noble a work, which may, by the providence of Almighty God, hereafter tend to the glory of His divine majesty in propagating of Christian religion to such people as yet live in darkness and miserable ignorance of the true knowledge and worship of God, and may in time bring the infidels and savages living in those parts to human civility and to a settled and quiet government, do by these our letters patents graciously accept of and agree to the humble and well-intended desires. This endeavor was for the express purpose of propagating the Christian religion. Accordingly, when the first colonists landed in Virginia Beach, they planted a wooden cross in the sand. Pastor Robert Hunt, the chaplain of Jamestown, knelt upon the cross and offered this prayer of dedication. We do hereby dedicate this land and ourselves to reach the people within these shores with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and to raise up godly generations after us, and with these generations take the kingdom of God to all the earth. May this covenant of dedication remain to all generations as long as the earth remains, and may this land, along with England, be evangelist to the world.
And America was for years, and it's based on that prayer right there.
Yeah.
I mean, we started as a Christian nation. Now, as I said in the last episode, am I going to say that everybody got everything right? Absolutely not. We're human. There's wickedness in the heart of man. But, and I understand that, but if you read that, this was a national, when he was laying the foundation here in this prayer, he's laying the foundation of the new land of America, and he's laying the foundation for what's to come, and he's dedicating this land to God and asking God to help our nation be a missionary to the world. And really, America has been the missionary to the world.
I would say, for the most part, God answered that prayer with a resounding yes.
Yeah.
You know, and I want you to notice, because this is important with discernment, okay? There are those who seek to deceive, right? The big thing that's happening right now, see, our nation, America was founded. And of course, 1776. But there's this project, and I think it's called the 1619 Project, is that right?
I think I've heard somebody mention it, but I don't know anything about it.
So the I think it's the 1619 project. I might have the year wrong. I'm just a little bit fuzzy. Don't take a cat nap just before you do a podcast. But the whole premise is that they wanted to say that this year, the particular year that slaves were brought over, is when America truly started, and so therefore we are systemically racist because we started with the institution of slavery. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just think about it here. If you're not going to count 1776 as our founding, which you should, mm-hmm. okay, why wouldn't we count 1606? Mm-hmm. I mean, that makes a lot more sense.
Right.
But you know why they didn't choose 1606? Because then they'd have to admit we're a Christian nation. Mm-hmm. We're founded on Christian principles, and the express purpose of our nation is to propagate the Christian religion and to spread the gospel throughout the entire world.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they don't talk about who the first slave owner in America was.
I don't know who the first slave owner was.
Really?
Yeah.
It was a black man.
Really?
The first slave owner in America was not a white man.
Really?
The first slave owner in America was a black man.
I had no idea.
Now, going along that lines, I want to address something here too, because Dr. Stewart talked about it, and
this is very important.
I think it is. It's really, really important, and this goes back to Charles Darwin. It goes back to what we read several weeks ago, in talking about creationism and so on and so forth. And we talked about how there were numerous different philosophers, albeit pagan philosophers, who had their idea of the primordial slime, rather, the Big Bang Theory, mutations, so on and so forth, evolution, whatnot. And Charles Darwin took all that and really synthesized it into his work. But really, mankind did not see each other as different races per se until Darwin, and he did that he introduced the idea of races so that he could animalize humankind. Because really, if you stop and think about it, and Dr. Stewart was talking about this yesterday, and he had like 3 or 4 different pictures of Jesus, and one of them was a Chinese Jesus or a Japanese Jesus or whatever, and Asian anyway, and one of them was a black Jesus, and one of them was an Indian Jesus, and one of them was first off, Jesus wasn't black, he wasn't yellow, he wasn't white, he wasn't
purple.
He was an olive-skinned Hebrew. He was a Jew. Yeah. He was olive-skinned. How do you get olive skin? Olive skin is a mixture of white, black, Asian, Indian. It's if you mix them all together in a melting pot, you're going to end up with olive. Mm-hmm. So this idea that we're all separate races, we're not. I'm sorry, there were 5 people or 5 men, or no, 4 men that got off the boat with Noah. Him and his 3 sons. That doesn't sound like more than one race. Because races is a Darwinian idea that was introduced in the 1800s, and it is flat out a stupid lie. We are the human race.
Well, and it's to play off of that, because it's important that we understand the implication here. Mm-hmm. Because, first of all, if you're a Christian listening to this, mm-hmm. you need to understand how to push back against this when people start talking about races. Second thing is that if you're not a Christian, let me really challenge your worldview here.
Right.
There's no doubt racism in different races, multiple races, comes from a Darwinian point of view, mm-hmm. worldview.
Why? Why does it come from a Darwinian point of view?
Well, just as you're describing that idea of he had to go and say, well, evolution, why is there differences? Mm-hmm. Now,
in survival of the fittest.
Well, and that's the point I'm getting at is there must be a supreme race mm-hmm. in inferior races. I'm not saying which. First of all, there are none. There's right. only one human race. So I'm not advocating for one or the other, or even saying that Darwin would propose such a thing, although he did. And the whole reality of it is, though, if you do believe in different races, you must realize that there must be a superior race because it's rooted in evolution, which is survival of the fittest. And so there must be differences in not just, noticeable different traits. Because, by the way, it's not just in different races, it's different families.
Right.
Your family's taller than my family.
Right.
Right? I
Right.
mean,
My 11-year-old is, I think, as tall as you are.
right, exactly. I mean, that's
Legitimately.
the thing. Right. It's one of those things of, it's just, and we're the same race here,
Right.
right? I mean, I'm a bit of a ginger, so I don't have a soul, but
I must not have much of a soul because my redheaded 17-year-old is a ginger. So,
but you look at this, you have to admit that there is racial supremacy if you believe
in evolution.
Mm-hmm. Or you can believe the Christian worldview that says we come from Noah and ultimately Adam and Eve, all created in God's image, one race, one people, all have inherent intrinsic value because we're made in the image of God.
Right. Right.
I mean, this gets me fired up because I hear all these pastors getting out today and they're saying, we have to apologize for our whiteness. And I'm going, wow, did you not read the Bible?
Right.
No, they didn't. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't get in my soapbox like that. But.
No, but it's true because, we all put our pants on the same way. We all put our shirts on the same way.
You put your pants on backwards too? Oh.
But, I get so fed up with it. We are the human race. We are God's children. We're created in the likeness and image of God. Who cares if you have different melanin levels?
Right.
And Darwin created that idea and fostered this idea of evolution to, if you want to look at somebody that's racist, look at Darwin. Look at Margaret Sanger.
Yeah. You cannot be consistent in any worldview if you believe there are different races.
Right.
And believe that you're not a racist. Because if you believe there are different races, you have to believe that there is a supreme race and inferior races. Mm-hmm. There has to be. Because why else are they different? They're not evolved equal. I was about to say created equal. But they're not evolved equal in that worldview because you can't evolve equally.
Right. Right.
Somebody has to be fitter.
Right, and that's where the fighting comes from because we have this mentality of survival of the fittest. It's not survival of the fittest. We were all created in the likeness and image of God, and if I understand that well, no matter what somebody looks like, if I see them as created in the likeness and image of God, I'm going to treat them. If I have a Christian worldview, I'm going to treat them as if they're a co-laborer, co-equal, and a fellow worker in the kingdom.
Well, and honestly, in Christianity, we don't have survival of the fittest. We have a pursuit of God's mercy. Mm-hmm. I mean, because we're not trying to say, hey, I can survive because I'm better than you, because none of us can survive on our own. We'd all go to hell. Mm-hmm. And I know some people are going to like hearing that, but it's the reality of it. Mm-hmm. For the wages of sin is death, and that death it's talked about is an eternity in hell forever. Mm-hmm. And we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Mm-hmm. And so it is God's grace and mercy that we are pursuing and seeking in God and His love. Man, He sent Jesus Christ to die, not for one race, yes, for one race, because we're just one race, the human race.
Well, what did Paul talk about? He said, breaking down the wall of separation. The wall of separation. There is now, therefore, no more Jew nor Greek. And that wall of separation is a man-made construct. It is a societal construct. The idea of races, individual races, is a man-made construct. It is not a God-made construct. God's made construct is you're all descended from Adam.
Right.
You're all cousins. Start acting like it and shut up and quit treating each other like garbage.
Right. Well, should we continue back to Jamestown, I suppose, on that note?
Sorry, this is one of those things that just is my pet peeve.
Well, and it's something that's huge here because, I get tired of getting called a racist, and I'm going, No, I believe everyone's made in God's own image. But Jamestown, our national law,
Right.
smooth transition, in case you're curious.
Conversational whiplash.
Uh,
That's all right. We're
Yeah,
all
here
good.
we go. Seeing you have a seizure, it looked like on. There we go. But sometimes I do things before I think about them. I thought, well, why did I do that? As every charter is incomplete without its corresponding bylaws, what is astounding is that contained within the original documents are the seeds of much of our Christian common law. As founder and Supreme Court Justice Joseph Story has noted, our ancestors brought with them its common law, general principles, and claimed it as their birthright. But they brought with them and adopted only that portion which was applicable to their situation. In particular, in 15th paragraph of the Charter of 1606, they brought with them the seeds of self-governance. In all other European settlements, such as under the monarchies of France, Spain, Portugal, the authority remained invested in the crown. In every charter, right in the settlements was government granted, thus limiting and potentially eliminating the possibility of self-governing colonies. In contrast, the authority being granted for these first English settlements is being done under the providence of Almighty God. Thus, the rights granted are inalienable. Does that sound a little familiar? And cannot be taken away. This Charter of 1606 stated that individuals in this colony shall have and enjoy all liberties, franchises, and immunities within any of our other dominions, to all intents and purposes, as if they had been abiding and born within our realm of England or any other of our said dominions. I'm just going to stop right there. That's why it was a big deal there wasn't representation. Big deal. Taxation without representation, nowhere else in England had that problem. Herein it is stated that the God-given rights of individuals would go with them to the New World. King James must have had his spectacles off when reading this, for it undermined the very premise of his new theology of the divine right of kings. Not only did it grant rights to the individuals of colonies, but it established the origin of those rights as coming from God, not James. This was the civil birth certificate of America and ensured their God-given rights, and was a critical clause quoted repeatedly by the founders as justification for the Declaration of Independence that took place nearly 2 centuries later. It was the charters of 1609 and 1612, largely written by Sir Edwin Sandys, one of the founders of the Virginia Company and member of Parliament, that allowed the seeds of Christian common law from England to truly begin to sprout in Jamestown, transferring control from the king to a company-appointed governor. Under the notion of divine right, King James believed he was the law, but Sandys believed that he was under the same law as everyone else. Thus he worked to limit the king's power where he could, as opposed to gaining freedom through some form of trickery. Sandys merely impressed upon James the realization that he would not want the colonies dependent upon him. Under Sandys' continued guidance, ideals of governments included greater religious toleration, the abolition of relics of feudalism, the establishment of freedom of trade together with the overthrow of monopolies, and the limitation of monarchical institutions, particularly the king's prerogative. Finally, the Ordinance of 1618 brought forth more fruit of the common law with America's first legislative assembly. On July 30th, 1619, the first representative legislative assembly in the New World convened in Jamestown. A governor, 6 councilors, and 20 representatives. The General Assembly met in response to orders from the Virginia Company to establish one equal, uniform government over all Virginia, which would provide just laws for the happy guiding and governing of the people there inhabiting. Thus, Jamestown provided the source of our national law, and the fact that America is governed of law and not of men. What do you think about all that?
I think it's interesting that like you said, that James must have had his spectacles off when he allowed this, because there was, like he said, it was laying the foundation of our roots for it was laying the seed, or the seed was in the ground and the roots were growing for the foundation of America and what we stand for, and how somebody can look at this. If you actually understand history, you cannot look at this time period and say that America was not founded as a Christian nation.
Right. And let me look something up really quick, because I think, if I remember correctly here, and I got to look at my notes to get the date correct, I think in this council, in the Virginia 1619,
so while he's looking this up here, I want to put a plug in real quick for our friend Jacob Hall at the Iowa Standard. If you haven't had a chance to stop by the iowastandard.com, I believe it is. It might be the iowastandard.org. But if you just do a search for the Iowa Standard, look up Jacob's work. Fantastic editor, fantastic reporter. Very fair, very integritous. I've gotten to know Jacob over the last several years and know him to just be a very integritous man. And that's not something I say lightly. I don't just hand that compliment out to anybody. I have to watch them for quite a while before I say that, because it's putting my name on the line too and stuff. But Jacob is one of those men that I could do that with. And then also to put a plug in for our friend Judd Saul and his group, Equipping the Persecuted Church, or Equipping the Persecuted, and I believe his website is equippingthepersecuted.org. So stop by his website and check out what they're doing in Nigeria with Christians that are being persecuted with Boko Haram. Did you find it there?
I did here. It's actually 1610. So,
okay.
So kind of the time frame that we're talking here. And let me just, if I would just read the law really quick.
Sure.
This is called Blue Law, or what became known as Sunday laws or Sabbath laws.
Okay.
And in 1610, Virginia established the law: every man and woman shall repair in the morning to the divine service and sermons preached upon the Sabbath day, in the afternoon to divine service and catechizing upon pain for the first fault, to lose their provision and allowance for the whole week following, for the second to lose the said allowance and also to be whipped, and for the third to suffer death.
Wow.
So now it gets pretty serious, right?
Wow.
Escalates pretty quick there. But these blue laws that was established in 1610, and by the way, these laws continued. It wasn't like it just ended. It continued at the founding of our nation in 1776. This was still the law. Mm-hmm. And the idea was here, of course, if you messed up once, you got fined. If you messed up twice, you got fined, and you got whipped. And if you messed up a third time, well,
death sentence.
Yeah, it's a death sentence. But these were actual legislative laws that were in America. And people like to say America wasn't founded as a Christian nation. Yeah.
So skipping church 3 times, we'd have a lot less people in America.
We would. We would.
We would have a lot less people in America right now.
And wow. I mean, that's, yeah.
Wow. I had not heard. You know, that's one of those things that might be in the vague recollection in the ether somewhere out here. But it's amazing what you start finding out when you start looking at the history and looking for the old paths. You start finding out that, you know what, we've really strayed a long way from.
Well, we also had blasphemy laws too. It wasn't just wasn't just Sabbath laws. We had blasphemy laws, if I remember this off the top of my head, so don't quote me on this, but I believe it was a fine upwards of $30 for blasphemy, and that equaled out to be something to the effect of like $30,000 in our day and age, something to that effect. So like, I mean, a huge fine for against blasphemy laws.
Right, because I mean, you stop and think about it. You know, back in the day, they weren't making, you know, $200 a day or $100 a day or whatever. It was $1 a day or 50 cents a day, and so $30 is a lot of money.
Right.
And so, you know, that adds up to a substantial sum. But on the flip side, it also shows how much our dollar has been devalued. You know,
true.
Go totally economic for a second, but it just goes to show how far our dollar has been devalued.
Well, I'm curious though, for $30,000, how much tea could someone get from?
Quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, probably enough to throw a Boston Tea Party.
I would be okay with that.
So, I mean, if you're feeling like spending $30,000.
Yeah, exactly. So, do we want to continue reading a little bit?
Well, where were we at time-wise here? We got a few minutes? Okay, well, we'll continue then. Jamestown, the struggle to survive here, and I think this is an interesting place. It says, yet, as amazing as it was to have those seeds sown in the very soil of this future glorious nation, the road to get there brought them to the brink of near extinction. The first arrival of Jamestown colonists consisted of gentry who were unaccustomed to manual labor, as well as artisans, farmers, and laborers with little experience in taming the wilderness. Rather than discovering a paradise inhabited by friendly people, Jamestown was a mosquito-ridden swamp. The brackish water of the tidal James River was a poor source of water, and death was far easier to find than fortune. Almost immediately after landing in May, the colonists came under attack from what came to be their sometimes friends, sometimes enemies, the 14,000 Algonquin-speaking Indians, ruled by the powerful leader Powhatan. I'm glad my name's Sam Jones. I'm just going to say that. By June 15th, the newcomers managed to build a 3-sided wooden fort that was formed around a storehouse, church, and a number of houses. Just stop for a minute. 3 buildings. And church was in there. COVID-19 center wasn't.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, and you know, the thing that I am struck by there is here they have these really noble cause that they're trying to do. And they pick one of the absolute, I don't want to say dumbest, but worst spots they could possibly find along the eastern seaboard to put it.
And now they had no idea it was a dumb spot,
No,
though. I mean,
they
you had to
didn't.
try it to find out, and they found out.
But that's where I'm getting is they have this noble plan, and oftentimes in that noble plan that we have, Satan lays the barriers to try to inhibit that noble plan.
That's right.
And to stop it and to stymie it and to stifle it. And the thing is they had to persevere, they had to push through, they had to continue on, and they would have never seen their noble plan be realized had they given up and stopped. It's kind of like the miner that goes out and I heard this story years ago, and I don't know whether it's a true story or not, but
It's
for
good,
the sake of
good illustration nonetheless. Huh?
Yeah, but so this miner goes out and he finds his claim and starts digging and he starts, gets down a ways and starts hitting some gold, and he has the claim assayed, which is where they check the claim and see if it's they can somehow, and I've never figured this out how, but somehow they can actually take what you're finding and calculate and see how rich of a vein this is that you've actually found and stuff. And like I said, I'm not a geologist, so I don't understand how that all works. But so he has it assayed, and they're like, dude, you have hit like the mother lode. You've hit one of the richest veins we've ever seen. And so he starts digging and digging and digging, and all of a sudden he loses the vein. Can't find it. And he digs 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 and can't find it anywhere. And finally he gives up and sells it and goes back to wherever he came from and sells it to this other guy. And this other guy brings in a geologist, an expert in that field. And the guy's like, no, there's a vein here. You just need to keep digging. And he was like 3 feet from one of the richest veins of gold ever found.
Wow. And
so that perseverance in the hardship, which is what you're seeing here, these guys had a noble vision, and they wanted to see that noble vision brought about. They wanted to see that noble vision of seeing sex trafficking stopped, or at least, severely disabled. And they went after it, but they ran into hurdles and roadblocks and all these different things that they couldn't see when they were landing on the shore. They thought they were landing in this beautiful paradise. They had this idea that it was going to go, and they had to persevere, and they had to struggle through, and they had to keep moving, and they had to keep going. And it's through their perseverance that we have America. And so, I think that one of the takeaways from this is that even in our own personal lives, when we're having struggles and we're going through it, we've been praying for our friend Pastor John Butcher this week, who had a stroke. I don't even remember, a couple days ago, or whatever, 4 or 5 days ago, and we've been praying for him, and he just walked out of the hospital, but he had to persevere. All of us had to persevere in our prayers and stuff. And so, that's the thing that I think people need to take away from this is, even though we're going through all this stuff right now with COVID and stuff, when we dig in and we persevere in our relationship with Christ, and we persevere in that time of testing and that trial, then we can see the seeds planted for the birth of something new that's greater and far beyond our reach. These guys didn't get to live to see the realization of their dream and vision, but yet they laid the foundation for something that has impacted the world.
Right. And you're talking about those hardships that continued. Do you want me to keep reading?
Yeah.
It says, disease, famine, and additional attacks from the neighboring Indians devastated the population so much that when the next shipload of 70 English settlers and insufficient provisions arrived in January 1608, only 40 or so of the original 104 settlers were still alive. It could have been worse, for records indicate that Pocahontas, one of the chief Powhatans, good, many daughters, became something of an emissary to the colonists, following an almost complete destruction of the fort by a fire in January 1608. Pocahontas brought food and clothing to the starving colonists. The fame of Pocahontas has been largely tied to the story of her saving of Captain John Smith after he was captured and taken prisoner to her chieftain father in December 1607. Although he feared for his life, Smith was eventually released, and many years later he attributed his saving to Pocahontas, whom he stated threw herself across his body. At the minute of my execution, she hazarded the beating out of her own brains to save mine. And not only that, but so prevailed with her father that I was safely conducted to Jamestown. For numerous reasons, historians are sharply divided over whether this actually happened as he described it. It is known, however, that she later negotiated with Smith for the release of other Indians who had been captured by the colonists during a raid to gain English weaponry. It appears that the early ascendance to leadership by Captain John Smith kept the colony from dissolving, but in the fall of 1609 he was injured by burns from gunpowder explosion and returned to England. The starving time winter followed Smith's departure in 1609, during which another 400 ill-fated colonists arrived and were met with starvation and disease. 80% of the population died, and many of the survivors were so sick and disillusioned they began to abandon the fort. But by June 1610 arrived arrival of new governor Thomas Gates, 3rd Baron de la Warr, known today as Lord Delaware, with 3 supply ships and 150 new colonists, got the colony back on its feet and kept Jamestown alive. I think that's probably a pretty good place to end that, to just kind of see that incredible thing. And there's more about Jamestown. We might pick it back up. But, you know, just in the nick of time, and think about that, 80% of those colonists died. How disheartening that would be. And yet if they wouldn't have persevered,
we wouldn't be sitting here.
That's right.
Or a very strong likelihood.
We might be speaking French or something. I don't know.
Well, you know, that brings up something that we were talking about, the Judeo-Christian roots of America, and Dr. Stewart was talking about this. I think it was this morning, maybe it was last night. I think it was this morning.
I think it was yesterday, maybe.
About
But it doesn't
Hebrew,
matter.
about the
Hebrew
vote.
language.
So something that a lot of you may not know. I know I didn't know it.
I didn't know it.
Was, and I love history. I mean, history is one of my biggest. You know, I love history, but there was a vote in 1780. You know, the founding fathers said we're free of Britain. We've washed our hands of them. If we're going to change our national language, now is the time. We don't have to deal with these clowns anymore. We're free of them. We can do what we want now, and we can change our national language. And the 2 languages that were up for vote were Hebrew and English. And Hebrew lost by 1 vote. And, you know, he posed a question, and he said, how would your reading of the Bible and how would your understanding of the Bible be different if you would have been a Hebrew speaker instead of an English speaker? And
a lot different.
And, you know, that really, I was like, that melted my brain quite a bit. I was like, wow, doggone it, 1 vote.
The question he asked that got me was when he said, you know, can you imagine what it would be like if everybody spoke Hebrew? Because my response was, I wouldn't understand anybody. But no, it would have dramatically changed our society.
It would have changed how we understand the Bible.
Yeah, and I mean, we probably wouldn't be in the hyper grace antinomian heresies if we were so attached to the Old Testament through the Hebrew religion or Hebrew language. And we were so close. You know. So close to not just being a Christian, founded as a Christian nation. I mean, we were founded as a Christian nation, but so close to just, I mean, probably setting ourselves up for being, you know, a successful, obedient Christian nation.
It would have been interesting. I would. It actually broke my heart when he told me that they lost out by 1 vote. I was like, man,
what was that 1 vote?
I don't know, but he needs beat. But anyway, so thank you guys for joining us today. You know, this is always a lot of fun. I always enjoy our conversations and our time together, and so like and subscribe and share and help us get the word out. It really does mean a lot to me. So we really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Make sure you stop by teshuatea.com or deliverancetea.com and order some of the tea or the bracelets or coasters, or make a donation, whatever. Help us rescue more girls out of sex trafficking. Andrew's working really hard. We're all working really hard to get these girls out and get them into a new life. And it's through your support and your help that we can do that. So I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. You've been listening to the Liberty Unveiled podcast, setting captives free 1 episode at a time. The Liberty Unveiled podcast is a part of the Unresolved Podcast Network and has been brought to you by Teshua Tea Company, TESHUAHTEA.com or deliverancetea.com.